I'm Alex Haugland.
And I'm Amy Haugland.
And today, we're driving our 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo.
Welcome to Everyday to Exotic.
The Porsche 944 Turbo is a direct evolution of the Porsche 924, which came about initially as a joint project between Volkswagen and Porsche to develop a replacement for the Porsche 914. Volkswagen, however, pulled out of the project due to financial issues, and Porsche took over the continued development.
Unlike the previous Porsche models, the 924 was developed with a fuel-injected, water-cooled, front-engine, rear-wheel drive layout. The car utilized an Audi design 2-liter inline 4-cylinder engine and was fitted with a rear transaxle to help balance the weight and improve handling. Although the car performed well, it began to fall behind in competitive offerings from other manufacturers, encouraging Porsche to upgrade the design, not to outright replace the 924, but instead to offer a higher performance car that was priced between the 924 and the much more expensive 911.
The first step of that upgrade was a switch away from the Audi-sourced engine to an in-house design. This engine was an innovative inline 4-cylinder, mounted at a 45-degree angle, which allowed for a lower hood line.
The new 944 entered the market in 1982 and sold incredibly well. By 1985, however, Volkswagen decided to stop producing the engine blocks used in the 924, so Porsche opted to switch to a detuned variant of the 944 engine for that car. Possibly because of this, the 944 received a number of updates and upgrades, as well as a turbocharged version being announced, keeping performance still well ahead of the 924 and maintaining its status as a mid-tier car.
The car continued to evolve over the next few years until production ended in 1991, when the car was replaced by the Porsche 968, which itself was an evolution on the 944 platform.
Though rarely seen on the road today, the Porsche 944 became Porsche's best-selling model at the time, with 163,192 cars built across all variants. So this is our 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo. They started building these cars actually in 1985, but it was for the 1986 model year. So this is actually the first model year of the Porsche 944 Turbo. There were a bunch of changes that they made over the production of the 924 and the 944, culminating in this car. It really is based off the idea of being very efficient, going through the air, very aerodynamic. The front bumper is a fully integrated bumper cover, as opposed to having its own separate sticking out bumper. That came in with the 944. It is just a very sleek, elegant car.
So with the changes in this era to the integrated bumper, they were able to fully integrate the lights into that bumper, which preserves the line of the car. You don't have the separate pods or anything like that. And then it flows straight into where the pop-up headlights are.
One of the main advantages of pop-up headlights was in an era where in the United States you were still required to have sealed beam headlamps. It let them fit a big 7-inch round headlamp in a car without completely screwing up the aerodynamics. When you didn't need the headlights on, you've got perfect airflow over the body. When you needed them on, okay, we'll sacrifice a bit to pop up. You shouldn't be driving that fast at night anyway.
Speaking of the pop-up headlights, another fun feature is these little guys. There's one for each headlight. And those are your headlight washers, just in case your headlights get too many bugs on them, you need to clean them off.
So one of the features that I really like in automotive design, particularly of the 1980s, was their love of the box flare. Essentially where you would have a hard line kind of dictating the shape of the flare of the car. And in this case, it starts all the way at the front, flares out over each wheel, and then comes back in, comes down the body, and then flares out again in the back with this sort of concave area here above, essentially to kind of really indicate that it's a flare and not just the shape of the car. It's something that's sort of unique in the 1980s and very, very popular at that time in styling, and usually only seen on pretty high performance cars.
That is something I enjoy as well, is the way that that line carries down to the back and then all the way around the back. I don't know, it does cool things with the light. You can see the metallic tone of the paint and everything.
It's very Coke bottle shaped.
It is.
It really emphasizes
is.
how much it is flared in both the front and the back.
It's not Pininfarina, but it has that feel. The color on this car is really fun. It's Kalahari Beige Metallic. Not a color name you would probably see on a lot of American cars. We don't tend to like beige.
Yes. Beige is boring.
Beige is boring. This is not a boring car. One of my favorite things is no longer fashionable. There is no chrome. It was not cool in the 80s. It was an extra thing they had to put on. But this is much more subtle in the way that it's designed, in that you don't have chrome emphasizing the lines of the car. They sort of let the design speak for itself.
Black is the new chrome.
Black is the new chrome.
I know you wanna
Like all cool cars, this has a spoiler. The spoiler is really interesting though, because it's foam rubber, so it's squishy. So you have a squishy spoiler, but it's lightweight.
And also, considering it goes up when you open the hatch, it's actually probably nice to not add all the weight on top of that large piece of glass.
Very true.
One of the other options that you see back here is the rear wiper. So like the front headlight washers, this was an optional feature on these cars. On a glass that's laid out like this, it's actually really nice. It let you see out of the back a hell of a lot better when rain is constantly pelting down on this. The bumpers on the back here are much like the ones that used to be on the front of these cars. It's definitely a high impact bumper, shock mounted. It fits in and flows with the lines of the car fairly well, despite sticking out quite a ways. One other thing that you'll see on the turbo cars is this rear valance splitter that basically was only on the turbo cars. I think the intention is to give it a little bit more downforce. I don't know how much it actually adds, but it looks cool.
Because it's cool, TM.
To open the rear hatch, you have to use the key, unfortunately. There is no just pushing a button. So you put in the key, turn it, and then lift. And as long as your shocks are good, it goes up and stays up pretty well. The trunk area of this car, or the hatchback really, is not too bad of a size. You can actually fit a fair amount of stuff back here, especially since the glass curves up as much as it does. It's fairly shallow for a good chunk of it. That really becomes an issue, especially when you want to put in wine. You could maybe fit 3 cases along right behind the seat, but it's going to stick up and you're going to see it. And it's going to be in the sun, which isn't necessarily very good for the wine. To try and hide things, there is a cover here that you can pull out and hook in place, and that covers up just about everything back in the trunk. But the problem is, again, it's very shallow. So if you put anything significant under here, it's going to stick up like this, and it's obvious that you're hiding something.
You might be able to put a couple of carry-on suitcases back there if you don't overpack them.
So you could use it for a weekend trip pretty easily. I wouldn't be putting tons of luggage back here. Also back here is the spare tire, which is sort of wedged at an odd angle and makes a bump in the carpet of the trunk in order to clear it, further limiting sort of what space you have, especially at the very far back. One of the other things you'll see back here is this, which is a bag for if you happen to take off the sunroof and want to have it open, it gives you some way to put it away and protect it.
Although the Porsche 944 technically has a rear seat if your fronts don't have legs, it also has a way of sort of expanding the hatchback section.
That would probably get you maybe another 3 cases of wine, possibly 4. But again, still up in the open. And now you can't cover anything.
Yeah.
One other rather odd thing that you'll see on this car also is this random extra keyhole. This is actually for another optional feature, which was the factory car alarm. And it was operated by its own separate key. You would insert the key, turn it 90 degrees, pull it out, and now the alarm is engaged. So if I have it and open the door with it in this position, alarm goes off. Turn the key off, alarm's done.
I know you wanna love
Okay, here are your keys.
Thank you, my sweet. Here we are in the interior, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the sunroof and get a little bit more light in here. So in order to do that, I turn the key, and then I push this button, undo front latches, push up.
Then I'll take it away.
And then if you want to, you can either put it in the bag that we showed you earlier in the back, or just leave it at home. The interior on this car is in really great shape. It's very brown. There is not a lot of contrast in here. It was the 80s. It's vinyl. I think they were really trying to push a leather look in the interior. It's pretty basic in here. You know, you have your usual switches. Things are labeled in a fairly standard way. Your gauges are clear. There's no frills. This is not set up to be fancy. You have what you need, and that's about it. Originally, this car had a tape deck. And so it has this really cool feature in the armrest. Push, and you push it up, and it's got your tape organizer still in there, including the Blaupunkt instruction tape to tell you how to use your radio. That's pretty cool, I have to say. This car has a lot of power things. It has power mirrors. The seat adjustments are really kind of fascinating. I'm not going to have the car on, so I'm not going to show you exactly how they work, but you have electrics for moving the back tilt forward and back, and for making the seat a little bit higher, a little bit lower. To actually move the seat forward, however, you still have that sort of pull lever thing in the front here, and you have to scoot your butt. That's an interesting hybrid thing that they did in this car. It's like, we'll add a little bit of technology, but keep some things familiar. It has, of course, the pop-up headlights, and it goes 2 clicks. And then 2 clicks, headlights off. That's another lovely feature about this car. It has a lot of alerts to tell you when things are happening that it doesn't like, or that may endanger you, like driving with the door open. Remember, kids, we don't do that. The steering wheel in this is pretty cool. It's the same as the one that's on the 911. In the 80s, things got very angular. You see that a lot more in this car, with curves giving way to angles, including the horn button. One of the things that I find really fascinating is the way that they did the stick shift. They have the boot, but it comes all the way up and over most of the top of the stick shift. There's a little bit of patina from, you know, actually shifting. This car gets driven. Ashtray with change in it. 55 cents. It's not going to get you very far right now. Here we have the glove box. I have to be a little careful opening the glove box because it's missing some bits that would stop it from, you know, smacking into my shins. But we have the original 944 turbo manual in there, as well as, you know, registration, all those important things, because we drive this. So we do have a little bit of contrast in here, not a lot, but it's like we were saying earlier, that black is the new chrome. This part is black and provides a nice contrast, and then we have this line that goes all the way across the dash that has your buttons and switches and a lot of your instrumentation in it. When the door is closed, then this little black contrast thing lines up with that continuous line, which is kind of a cool detail. The door pockets are, you know, here. I love this kind of swoopy thing that they're doing there. I'm not sure about the carpet. It goes with, it flows into the carpet on the inside of the car. Something else I absolutely love about the door is these itty bitty little plastic door handles. I mean, there's definitely enough room for, you know, anybody to get their fingers in there, but I love how it's flush with the door and sort of inset. There's just something about the design that I really like. So I have scooched the seat way, way forward now. So I still have an okay amount of room because I'm short. But you would still be hard pressed to put a full-size person with legs in the back seat. However, the back seat is very cush and very safe. There are seat belts back there. I also love the carpet detail here. And it says Porsche. And there's matching Porsche up here too. And that's the interior. And now over to Alex in the engine bay. Are the finger guns too much?
No, I like it.
So, the engine bay is pretty full. There's not a lot of excess unwasted space in this. They did a very good job of kind of packing everything in, however, so most things are relatively accessible. Your engine is this 2.5 liter inline 4-cylinder. You can see that it's mounted at a 45-degree angle, slanting back with our intake on this side, and the exhaust is down here. Again, mounted at a 45-degree angle, so it doesn't stick up as much. That also means that the hood line is able to be lower. So the engine puts out about 217 horsepower. Theoretically, it lets the car go over 150 miles an hour as far as with the way that it's geared. One of the other things with this engine that's actually rather unique is in the design of the engine, it has two counter-rotating balance shafts that help balance out and smooth out the engine. This was actually a design that was developed by Lanchester in the UK in, I believe, as early as 1904. But then Mitsubishi improved on it significantly, and Porsche licensed the technology from Mitsubishi for these cars. So it basically takes a 4-cylinder, which has a little bit of an inherent out-of-balance character to it, and makes it run about as smooth as an inline 6. So it's a really smooth, nice running engine. So the engine feeds its power through the drive shaft to a rear transaxle. And that rear transaxle is a 5-speed unit, and it has a final drive ratio of 3.375 to 1, which actually gives this car pretty long legs and gets its top speed over 150 miles an hour. So that final drive ratio came in with the Porsche 944 turbos and wasn't the same in the normally aspirated cars, which were definitely geared more for low-end performance. Although you cannot see the turbo underneath the car, the physical unit itself, you can, of course, tell that it's a turbo because it's proudly displayed in text on the airbox. You've got your intake on top. The distributor runs off of the cam. Here we've got our 4 spark plug leads for the 4 cylinders. The other thing that you'll notice here is this giant motor with a little rubber cap on it. This is actually for the headlights. And one of the things that they're required to do was have an emergency way of raising the headlights, which you can do by manually rotating the motor. It's very slow, but it will eventually cause the headlights to pop up. So if the motor dies, you can still have headlights on. This, of all odd things, this nice mechanical block here, is actually for your cruise control. One of the more optional things on here, of course, is the strut tower brace. That wouldn't necessarily have been stock on these cars, but it helps with the handling. We have the top of our strut towers here. There's McPherson struts on the front. The rear suspension actually originally came from the Volkswagen Super Beetle on the 924, or developed from it, I should say, and is a semi-trailing arm suspension system. Typical Porsche, it's evolved quite a bit over that time. By this period, there are cast aluminum control arms, but it is basically that same design carrying forward. And to some extent, for the very end of these cars with the 968, you theoretically can take a lot of the parts and, with a bit of work, go and retrofit them on the earliest of the 924s. So the brakes are these 4-pot calipers that are actually borrowed from the 911 for the turbos to basically give it a little bit of extra braking to match the increase in power. And you can see the calipers here, nicely painted black with the Porsche logo, beautifully polished off on the aluminum. Wheels are alloys. These are actually 17-inch wheels. The tires are staggered from the front to the rear. It helps fit with the fact that you've got more power going to those rear wheels.
So I love this car. I think this car is very fun to drive. It is very comfortable, very friendly for a Porsche. I am loving the windy roads. It also tracks very straight. The steering is very easy. The clutch isn't too heavy. Changing gears is super simple. The pedals are placed very comfortably for me. Just all around, it's a good car. It's fun.
I don't need to be on my A game all the time.
Alex said that it was remarkably civilized, but it's still very sporty. I mean, you get on the accelerator and it goes. It likes to rev, it likes curves. This car is very happy cruising along in third gear most of the time. I mean, you can get into fourth if you need to, but on a lot of these roads, you really don't need to. If we were getting on the freeway, we'd get into fourth and fifth.
For a sports car, though, it's actually pretty quiet.
That is
Most
true.
of the noise we're hearing is the wind noise and things. It doesn't have that like really raspy exhaust note or things that you tend to find on most sports cars and things.
I will also say that the seats are incredibly comfortable for a sports car. For me, this car is kind of like the Stag in that it's like, oh yeah, I feel like I could just keep driving this and be totally fine.
Do I ever really try? Well, it feels like I'm working on myself till I die.
Anything you don't like about the car?
Trying to think if there's anything that makes me go, eh, but I don't think so. I mean, the fact that it seems to be made for someone who is my height, or at least
accommodates someone your height.
someone my height.
It's definitely not made for someone your height.
No, but it definitely accommodates me.
I mean, the Auto Bianchi Bianchina or the Austin Healey Sprite are
This
more
is
made
true.
for someone your height.
This is very true. But it accommodates me in a comfortable way. I don't feel squished up against the steering wheel. I don't feel like I'm really low. I can see over the steering wheel, which is really kind of a luxury sometimes.
It feels like
This car feels so... Okay, that's a disadvantage. This car feels really stable, and so I don't feel like I'm going too fast into the corners, even though I probably am.
I mean, it can handle it, but it is one of those things where, depending on how well you know the road and things like that,
Yeah, it's
you
just...
can quarter at a higher speed than what you're necessarily doing. But at the same time, you need to be prepared.
Yes. Sometimes you need to slow down a little bit for safety. But I will say that this car feels safe, even going fast. But that can be a dangerous thing. One can get overconfident.
it screams at me. Do I ever really try? Well, it feels like I'm working on myself till I die.
So part of the thing I love about this is that it is a turbo. If you get on it, it goes fast. It does kind of what you want a turbo to do. It takes a fair amount of work to get up there because of it just having a slow spool up. But once it gets going, it gets going. It's always thrilling to drive a turbo car because it's always sort of one of those, okay, I hit the pedal, wait for it, whoa, there it is. And honestly, that could be a lot of fun.
She said, don't you know that I'm a ghost?
It's very much though an 80s turbo. I've got more modern turbo cars. They don't quite have the same lag. They're much better balanced as far as like when the turbo kicks in, how it operates, things like that. But at the same time, even in this era, this would have been a blast to drive if you had never experienced a turbo car. And turbo cars really came in mostly in the 80s. They do predate it, but really the 80s is when it really picked up. A Porsche 911 is a Porsche 911, but with the turbo, wow, that's the cool one. And in some ways it is. They're really nice, fun cars to drive. Gives you a lot of the same thrill as driving other turbo cars. It's a little bit of a different driving experience. The thing I really like about this car, though, compared to the Porsche 911, is the weight balance is almost perfect. It is almost 50-50. It's very neutral handling. It doesn't understeer, it doesn't oversteer, and this is basically a stock configuration car. This hasn't really been modified. It just does everything you really want it to do. It is the kind of car that you feel like you could go through corners at twice the posted speed without much of an issue at all. And generally you can. You can see why this was at the time Porsche's best-selling car. It was more affordable than a 911. It still was a sports car. The build quality was still great. It still handled well. Just a really nice all-round driver. Yeah, it's not rear engine. Yeah, it's not 911 shaped. I kind of wish fewer Porsches were 911 shaped at this point because there'd be more variety. But at the same point, these were great cars.
I'm really happy this one is in our collection. I feel like it's fun and not frustrating. For me especially, it takes me a little while to get to the fun.
Yes.
Because I have to figure out, okay, this is different, and where's the clutch point, and stuff like this. I got in this car and didn't need any run-up at all.
It drives like a modern car.
It drives like a modern car.
Steering is light, shifting is great, especially since it's a rear transaxle. A lot of, especially early rear engine cars, have very vague shifting because you've got long linkage. It doesn't feel that precise trying to find your opening to shift into. This car is just great.
Oh, and I love that.
Yep. And for Porsche at the time, this was sort of a mid-level priced car. The 911 was still king. It was still the more expensive option. But these were more affordable. And not necessarily the cheapest car that you could buy, even necessarily for Porsche with the turbo and things. But definitely a much more affordable sports car.
Which is probably one of the reasons why they were so popular. Is because they were more accessible and it was still, you still got a really high performance vehicle.
And you have to think, what were your other options in the 80s? All the British stuff was gone. You've got some cool Japanese cars, but that was sort of its own market. Didn't really compete quite the same way as the European cars. You've had Ferrari, that's even more expensive. This predates the Miata.
Yeah.
So we don't really have that as an affordable sports car. You've got Corvettes, they're great in a straight line. This thing is, in many ways, the anti-Corvette. It's great in curves far more than the straight. It's not bad in the straight either, but it's not all about that raw horsepower.
Yes. It really is a balanced vehicle in pretty much every way.
Yes.
The best of all possible worlds.
There aren't that many other great options in the 80s. Porsche was one of the best that you could get.
Well, now we're back in the studio after another beautiful drive through the countryside of Oregon.
And it's time for the Haugland Score. Here's how it works.
Alex and I have individually rated the car in 5 categories, each with a rank of 0 to 10. Then we add our scores together to give us the final Haugland score.
After we combine our scores, the results go up on the board. On performance, I gave this car a 9. It kind of is a perfectly balanced, wonderful performing car. The turbo makes it very exhilarating as far as acceleration, handling's very neutral, it steers very nicely. It really is exactly what you want in a sports car.
And I gave it a 9 for very similar reasons. It's so easy to drive. And yet, if you want to go fast, it will go fast. In fact, it was a little bit difficult for me to not go fast in this car. So our next category is style. I gave it a 7. It is beautiful. It's very distinctive. Obviously a Porsche, if that makes sense.
I also gave it a 7. I mean, it's a good-looking car. Very German in its styling in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Elegant, efficient, nothing excessive. But it's not also a car that I leap out and go, oh, that is a Porsche 944. Oh my God, what a wonderful design.
You don't necessarily want it on your wall.
Yeah. Moving on to drivability, I gave this car a 9. The only reason I don't give it a 10 is because it's got a rear glass hatch. And one of the things I really don't like is not being able to put something in the back of the car and having it out of sight. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in that makes this car not sort of a perfect 10.
And I gave it an 8. It's so drivable. I'm so happy when I'm in it. I feel like I can put things in it. I could park it pretty much anywhere and not worry about it. But visibility of your items makes it less secure.
Yeah.
So for significance, I gave this a 7. It is a significant design in Porsche's heritage, I guess I should say, and it is kind of significant in our collection, but it's not as unique and special as some of the other cars.
For significance, I actually gave this car a 5. It's sort of a forgotten Porsche in a lot of ways. It's one that most people are like, they weren't that excited about it. It being front-engined, rear-wheel drive, it didn't really necessarily capture the love that like the 911 of the same era was doing. That said, it's a decent car to belong in the collection.
I feel like it should have been more significant than it was, but history told a different story.
Absolutely.
So for delight, I gave it a 6, because while I loved every second of being in it and it made me really happy, we didn't get quite the same reaction when we were out in this car as we have with some other cars where people just reacted very strongly in a very happy way.
I also gave it a 6 for pretty much the same reasons. There are a lot of people like, wow, I haven't seen one of those in years. But it's not the kind of car that people are usually excited about.
Yes.
It's a delightful car to drive, but it doesn't inspire the same wonder in people who see it.
All right, we've done some math, and the total Haugland score is 73 for our 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo. This gives it the same score as our 1970 Mercedes 280 SL.
Uh-oh, we cannot have two cars with the same score. Here we go again.
Car clash?
Car clash.
Bosses, the Mercedes 280 SL and the Porsche 944 Turbo.
To make this happen, I'm going to list a couple positives for each car and a couple negatives. You do the same, and then we determine which one beats the other one out.
We'll give the winner a small bonus, just to give it its own spot in the ranking. So this is an incredibly practical car, especially when you consider that it is a sports car. It's not a GT cruiser the way that the Mercedes is.
My biggest complaint about the Mercedes is I wanted it in fifth gear.
Oh, absolutely.
You're sitting there constantly revving on high RPM if you wanted to go down the highway or something like that. This car, if anything, is sort of the opposite problem. It's perfectly happy going high speeds and take it up to 153 miles an hour if you're crazy enough.
So on the road, this is a more practical car in a lot of ways for sheer driving.
But the Mercedes has an elegance that this car really doesn't. It's a very different driving experience. The Mercedes is a comfortable car to just kind of go down the countryside roads, especially when you take off the hardtop. You've got a nice open car. This, we can remove the sunroof, but it's not quite the same as that true open air motoring.
Very true.
The Mercedes is probably more significant. I think it has more delight for a lot of people to see it. Those are the areas where I think that it really tends to excel over this car.
It is technologically more significant in a lot of ways. They did more new things with the Mercedes than they did with the Porsche.
It's by far one of the more memorable cars. I mean, if people think of really nice Mercedes cars of the past, 280 SL especially, the Pagoda SLs, are usually pretty high on that list.
I think both of us are leaning towards the Mercedes as getting the bonus.
I'm actually leaning the other way.
Are you?
We're not done yet.
Okay.
If I were to pick a car that I was going to spend more time on the road in, I'd probably actually pick this. I can drive it more often. I can use it in all kinds of conditions. It has newer, better handling. It drives more smoothly. It steers better. It's a car I think I enjoy the actual driving experience in more. I could truly use this every day, much more than I think I could with the Mercedes.
Honestly, I agree with you on that because I found this car so much easier to drive.
Yes.
I could just get in it and go. As a passenger, the Mercedes is really nice.
Absolutely.
But as a driver, this is better.
So I would describe it, the Mercedes is the better car to be seen in. This is the better car to be behind the wheel of.
That is
And
very
I think that
true.
really kind of summarizes it for me.
You make really, really, really good points. And I agree with you. I'm thinking that the Porsche gets the bonus.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Done. So, that puts our 944 Turbo in 6th place with a final score of 73.5, while our Mercedes 280 SL gets bumped down to 7th.
It's so hard to choose between some of these cars.
It's really difficult, especially since they're both great cars, but for very different reasons.
Yes.
Well, if you're interested in seeing our Mercedes review, if you have not seen it yet, there's a link that will come up here somewhere on the screen, depending on exactly how you're watching this. Welcome to the world of YouTube.
Thanks again for supporting Everyday to Exotic. If you enjoyed what you saw here and you want to see more, remember to like, subscribe, and tell all your friends. We appreciate every bit of support you give us.
Thank you for watching Everyday to Exotic. Bye. Okay.
We really were.
We're done.
Yes, we really were on the same wavelength with this car.
Here we're going to do another railroad crossing and just carry right across it.
Whoa!
And the glove box pops open.
Well, that's not supposed to happen. Duly noted. Perhaps I should lock the box.